How long, Sanjeev, were you looking on your own before you started working with us? I can't remember.
Yeah, it was probably so I started looking in May and actually in April by myself, and I joined
Mm-hmm.
your program on July 4th.
Mm-hmm.
So probably about 3 months, 3 solid months before I joined your team.
How many
And that,
interviews did you go on before then?
uh, maybe two, and that's when I realized very quickly I need some help. I I hadn't interviewed in over 20 years, and so I think that was the big aha. And yeah, things certainly have changed, and definitely it was yeah, your program has really set me up for success.
Yeah. What so that's typically our next question. Say, hey, at what point do you know you need help? And you were like, hey, it had been 90 days and I went on 2 interviews and I'm like, I don't think this is the way it's supposed to work. And I don't remember actually how long. Let me look up
Well,
real
actually,
quick.
it took a while. I remember you and I prepped for I think your first interview on July 4th.
Right.
For where you're at right now. So you're at a very large company, so it took a while for the interview process to go through, but
Mhm.
um, we're really excited for you. So tell us a little bit about how that all shook down. We did a lot. You went on a lot of interviews because it was a high level company.
And then
Yeah,
they flew you out.
Yeah.
yeah, so I went on 13 interviews, and you're correct. So right when I had joined your program, it was right around July 4th. It was that very same weekend that I had a contact, yeah, that actually put me in touch with Subway. So the timing couldn't have been any better. I had a lead working, they got me in touch, and then the timing was perfect because through your program, you could kind of you not kind of you did coach me through the entire process. Here's what you need to be asking for. Here's how we prepare. Everything from the very first interview with which is with the recruiter, and then as I
Mhm.
started meeting with the HR folks at Subway and the leadership and whatnot. So every interview was slightly different, and also the feedback I was getting from the interview, from the recruiters and from HR, and just relaying that back to you. You said, okay, well, here's what we need to change or tweak for the next interview. That was really key for me. Um, every interview was slightly different, and so it's not a cookie cutter approach by any way, shape, or form. And I went through 13 interviews, and the last three were basically with the same individuals because they're like, well, are we, are
They had to fly you out and they're like, let's
right,
meet you in person. I remember during this time too, we never really talk about follow up a lot on these videos, but man, it was like they're supposed to get back this day,
right,
call, text, and then you left. I remember when you left and you're like, hey, 3 people went up there to flew to meet with the CTO and CIO of Subway. And then they're like, oh, well, we're going to, let someone know in a week. And then like 2 weeks have gone by and you're like,
right.
oh man, kind of just sweating. That's what happens in these long ones. And I do remember too, before we go into the next question, is when you first got that offer in, and then they were like, we kind of shot back saying, hey, can we just get a little bit more, right? And then they were like, no. And then they were like, yes.
Right.
It's funny how all that pans out. They're like, we can't do any more on the bonus or the base. Hey, yeah, but what can you do?
Right. So
So
yeah, it was a little towards the end there, it was a little frustrating. I'm like, okay, well, I just want this to be over with.
yeah.
But you're right though, we went through the negotiations and everything else, and basically they said no to all our requests or on a
Mm-hmm.
counter, which I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay. And but at the end of the day, Tim, you flat out asked me, goes, is this a fair deal? And at the end of the day, it was a fair deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's always nice to ask a little bit more. So I really had to sleep on it. I'm like, yeah, it is a fair deal. But then when I went back and asked them again, say, okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
hey, what about the relocation piece and what can you do
Mm-hmm.
there? And yeah, there was a misunderstanding between the recruiter and what
Mm-hmm.
HR, what they had told HR. Yeah, when I put it to them that way, I'm like, okay, well, I can stay with friends and family for a short period of time, but not for like a year or 2 years. And that's when I think that changed their mind. So they went back and came back. So, hey, we'll up
Yeah.
it and we'll give you this relocation assistance.
Always ask one more time. Always ask one more time. Awesome.
So Sanjeev, what did you find the most valuable? Some people think it's the group calls and the social integration. Some people think it's the mindset, the interview prep. For you, what was the most valuable part of the program?
I'd say it's a combination of things. One, first and foremost, it's really getting the right mindset. And now I've heard this before, but I didn't really realize it until I actually was going through the program, especially through these interviews. When I was at on interview 8 or 9, I'm like, okay, well, how many more interviews is this going to take? Now this is just mentally draining. But I've heard some other team members in this program said that you have to get in the right mindset, and I absolutely agree with that. Is saying if you really want it, you gotta be in it 100%. It's not a part-time gig, or it really is another job, looking for a job, and just clearing out. Okay, well, I haven't heard back. Is this a bad thing? Is this a good thing? Just getting all those negative thoughts out of your mind and just think positive and think it's going to happen.
Mhm.
And what I noticed with me in particular is, okay, well, I'm working towards this. Yeah, things are looking pretty good. The process became that much more easier, with gaining more confidence, because when I get to the next interview, it's like, okay, well, they weeded out some people and I made it to the next round. It kind of boosted my confidence a little bit more.
Mhm.
And then the other thing is, your styles are just totally different. Tim, you have one
Mhm.
style, and Carrie, you have a totally different style. And so for me, I mean, I kind of leverage both. I'm like, okay, well, let me see what Tim's saying this time, and tried that, and that worked great, was comfortable with it. And many times I went Kara with her style and her line of questioning in the interview. And for me, I mean, two totally different styles, and I could actually pick and choose, based on what I felt comfortable with and
Mhm.
going into interviews. So I think that was key too, having that option.
Yeah, and I know when you talk about that mindset piece too, it's difficult. Everyone knows they have to be positive, right? But you can't just say I need to be positive. You have to be surrounded. Your environment has to be positive. There's so
Right.
many things like when people say, "Hey, you need to just think positive." Sometimes it's really hard to do that when you're under stress and stuff. So unless you're a part of a community and unless you have like tactics and strategies to really work on that, it makes it very difficult.
And one of the
So
things that you had mentioned too is the interviews. You went on 13 different interviews. And sometimes people think like, oh, I'll just prep for an interview. Okay, I'm good. I'm good to go. I prepped, but every interview was different, and prepping
Right.
for each one just to make sure that you nailed every single one was just like, it was so great to watch you flourish through the prep and nail each one. So that
Well,
was awesome.
Well, thank you to both of you, because it really was, I was freaking out about the interview early on, but as you went through this process, it's not really an interview, it's more of a conversation, and that's what I
Absolutely.
ended up having. So rather than them asking me all the questions, towards the end there, I was asking them a lot of the questions, and it turns out they ended up doing a lot of the talking, especially towards the end,
Yeah.
which made it that much easier.
Awesome.
yeah, because we always talk about, just being the consultant on every interview, whether it's the first or down the line when you're meeting with the executive team, how just important that is. Hey, so Sanjeev, our last question is, what advice would you have someone who's considering working with us? Like a lot of people watch these videos, right? So we always kind of put it in your lane and say, if someone was here right now, it's been 90 days, hypothetically, they've been on 2 interviews. What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I'd say believe in the process. The process really does work, and I'm one of many examples of that. So, as long as you're willing to put in the work and the effort, things will happen. Even if you get rejected from interview, which happened to me, it's
Mhm.
I use it as a learning experience. It's like, okay, well, it's at the end of the day, it's not always about the fit. It's also about making that connection too. And sometimes, you've talked about making that connection. You could be the best qualified person for that position, but if you don't make that connection, but using that as a learning opportunity for the next interview is what I really learned. So my 2 cents are to believe in the process and just put forth the effort and the work, and things will happen.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that. So I know when we talk about, showing up with positivity, opportunity, being the consultant on the interviews, but also be aware that you should be getting no's during this process, because it'd be kind of weird if you went on every job interview and everyone told you yes. If that happens, you're probably targeting too low. And you have to be aware that you have to go through the no's to get to the yes. That's just a
Right.
part of, being successful. So, hey, thanks so much, and we
Thanks,
wish
Sanjeev.
you the best of luck, at Subway, and appreciate it.
No, thank you. And then if I can be a resource to help anybody else, absolutely, please let me know. I mean, always willing to help, and so definitely want to pay it forward. So if there's anyone in the program that I could be of any assistance, please let me know.
Awesome.
Awesome. Will do.